January 1945. A brittle morning frost coats the American POW camp in western Germany. The sky is pale, heavy with the promise of snow. Rows of wooden barracks stand silent, save for the faint crunch of boots on frozen earth. Inside one hut, German female prisoners stand in stiff lines, breath visible in the cold air. Eyes downcast, hands clasped nervously in front of them, the door at the far end creaks open. Guards step aside, revealing an upright piano, polished to a soft gleam, its keys gleaming like frost. No one had expected this. The women exchange bewildered glances, suspicion and curiosity flickering across their faces. A young corporal gestures toward the instrument. One woman steps forward, her hands trembling. Fingers hover above the keys, hesitant. Then, slowly, she presses a note. A soft, haunting sound fills the room. Silence falls. Other prisoners inch closer, captivated, as the melody spreads warmth across the frigid hut. The guards watch too, uncertainty in their eyes, as music simple, human, unifying reaches across lines drawn by war. In that moment, something fragile and extraordinary pierces the tension. Something neither guns nor orders could achieve. By late 1944, the tide of World War II in Europe had shifted decisively. Allied forces had pushed inland after the D-Day landings of June, liberating towns and villages across northern France. Behind the front lines, a growing number of German soldiers, including auxiliary personnel and female auxiliaries, were being captured and processed into prisoner of war camps run by the Americans and British. These camps, scattered across France and later Germany, became temporary homes for those removed from the battlefield, their fates now resting in the hands of captors governed by military codes and international law. Female prisoners were a distinct category. Unlike male combatants, many were young women who had served in support roles, administrative offices, communications, medical units, or logistical divisions. They were members of organizations such as the Luftwaffe or the German Red Cross Auxiliary Corps. Their uniforms often bore insignia signaling rank or assignment, but rarely indicated combat experience. Despite this, their capture was not without tension. Allied forces remained cautious, uncertain of the extent of training or loyalty, but also bound by the 1929 Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, which mandated humane treatment regardless of gender. American military doctrine emphasized order and discipline, but also attempted to integrate small measures of morale and recreation to prevent unrest in camps. Unlike the Soviet or even British approaches, U.S. commanders recognized the psychological toll of captivity. Reports circulated within the U.S. military that music, books, and structured routines could reduce tension, encourage compliance, and maintain overall health among prisoners. Barracks often contained communal spaces, mess halls, recreation huts, and in some rare instances, musical instruments. Piano placement was unusual, but not unheard of, reflecting the influence of Red Cross donations or officers' personal initiatives. To preserve a semblance of normalcy, daily life in the camps followed rigid schedules. Women woke early to the sound of bugle calls or whistles, lined up for roll call, and participated in cleaning, laundry, or work details. Meals were sparse but adequate, often consisting of bread, soup, and occasional protein. Surveillance was constant. Guards, armed but generally restrained in behavior, monitored for signs of disorder or escape. Punishments existed, but were rarely severe, especially for female prisoners, whose infractions were mostly limited to disobedience or attempting to breach curfews. Despite the strict routines, prisoners sought small reprieves. Some exchanged stories of home, recited poetry, or sang quietly. Letters, when allowed, connected them to families left behind in a war-torn Germany. Among these activities, music held particular significance. For many German women, piano lessons had been part of childhood, and classical melodies offered a fragile tether to a life disrupted by total war. When instruments were made available, even under supervision, the act of playing transcended mere recreation. It became a reclaiming of identity, a quiet assertion of dignity amidst captivity. The contrast between expectation and reality weighed heavily on the prisoners. Many anticipated harsh treatment, rumors of brutality having traveled faster than the front lines themselves. Stories of forced labor, malnutrition, and strict discipline at Soviet-run camps filled their minds. Instead, the American approach, structured yet humane, introduced a dissonance. Guards sometimes expressed surprise at their own restraint, while prisoners, initially wary, cautiously adapted. The presence of a piano, a luxurious and improbable object, symbolized this gap between fear and reality. Within this framework, the stage was set for an extraordinary moment. A simple act inviting a German female prisoner to play a piano would resonate far beyond the wooden walls of a barracks. It would expose a meeting point between humanity and hierarchy, between cultural memory and military order, and between expectation and surprise. That moment, small and intimate, was embedded in a broader context, a Europe still engulfed in chaos, a military system navigating law and morality, and a group of women navigating both fear and hope in the uncertain limbo of captivity. The music, when it finally came, did not emerge from an empty void. It arrived from decades of cultural practice, years of disciplined study, and an enduring human need for expression, a need that even war could not extinguish. And yet, this single, quiet act would ripple through the camp, revealing dimensions of the war rarely captured in reports or statistics. It was more than melody. It was a brief restoration of agency, dignity, and shared humanity. By early 1945, American POW camps had become complex microcosms of wartime Europe. As Allied forces advanced deeper into German territory, more prisoners were transported from frontline captures to camps in France, Belgium, and Western Germany. These transfers were logistically challenging, requiring coordination between infantry, transport units, and camp administrators. Female prisoners were moved separately from men, both for security and propriety. Yet their journeys were still fraught with uncertainty. Many arrived exhausted, anxious, and uncertain of what awaited them behind barbed wire. American-run camps prioritized security, but were consciously designed to maintain humane conditions. Officers understood that mistreatment could provoke unrest, complicate repatriation, and even reflect poorly on U.S. forces in international reports. The War Department encouraged recreational facilities, books, and supervised work assignments. Accounts from camp records in late 1940 reveal that recreation huts often included tables, chairs, and occasionally musical instruments. These spaces were carefully monitored, allowing prisoners brief moments of personal expression without compromising camp discipline. The German women entering these camps carried deep-seated expectations, shaped by the harsh propaganda of the Third Reich. They had been taught to anticipate strict punishment, rigorous labor, and humiliation at the hands of the enemy. Yet, the Americans offered a starkly different environment, regulated, disciplined, but surprisingly humane. Letters and testimonies from German female POWs described this dissonance: initial wariness, giving way to cautious curiosity. For many, the novelty of simple freedoms, such as walking unescorted within a designated area or accessing a recreation hut, was both startling and profoundly affecting. Music became a subtle but powerful element in this environment. The piano, in particular, was more than a decorative or recreational object. It was a conduit for emotional resilience. Historical records show that some camp commanders encouraged prisoners with musical training to play during rest periods, recognizing its calming effect on both guards and inmates. The sound of a piano offered psychological relief from monotony and fear. For German women trained in the arts, even in a limited capacity, playing music allowed them to reclaim a fragment of their pre-war identity. It bridged the gap between captivity and self-expression, offering an unexpected sense of agency. The psychological benefits were documented in contemporaneous U.S. Army reports. Music reduced instances of unrest, provided focus during structured routines, and even created informal opportunities for camaraderie among prisoners. For the Americans, it was a practical application of morale theory. Controlled recreation fostered order and compliance while minimizing overt conflict. For the prisoners, it was a reminder that their humanity had not been erased. Even in the midst of confinement and war, camp routines remained strict. Roll calls were conducted at dawn. Work details ranged from maintenance and laundry to clerical assignments. Inspections ensured conformity with regulations. Meals, while simple, were sufficient to meet basic nutritional needs. Guards maintained watchful eyes, but their supervision was tempered with restraint. The combination of order, security, and minor freedoms created a peculiar balance, a structured environment where prisoners could exist momentarily at ease, without constant fear of punishment. Cultural tensions, however, never fully disappeared. Many German women struggled to reconcile the American approach with their preconceptions of enemy behavior. Rumors of harsh treatment in Soviet or other Allied camps amplified their anxieties. The sudden appearance of a piano in the recreation hall, luxurious, improbable object only intensified this contrast. It represented both an anomaly and a challenge. Could one allow oneself to experience a fragment of joy amid a war defined by loss, separation, and fear? In this context, the moment when a German female prisoner approached the piano was not a trivial act. It reflected years of cultural upbringing, the discipline of formal music training, and the innate human drive for self-expression. It also reflected the broader operational philosophy of American camps, a recognition that humane treatment, structured opportunity, and controlled freedom could coexist with security. This intersection of policy, culture, and psychology created a unique environment, one in which the simple act of playing a piano could resonate far beyond the walls of the barracks. And so, as the woman's fingers met the keys, the music became both a personal assertion and a subtle challenge to assumptions, an illustration of what captivity could allow when tempered by order and empathy. It set the stage for examining multiple perspectives on this event, revealing the complex interplay of human emotion, military policy, and wartime morality for many of the German women. The sight of a piano in an American POW camp was nothing short of astonishing. Music had been a constant in their lives before the war lessons at home, school performances, evenings at family gatherings. Now, in the cold, regimented environment of captivity, it was as if a fragment of that past had suddenly returned. The first hesitant notes struck by a young prisoner carried more than melody. They carried disbelief, relief, and a fragile sense of dignity. The emotional impact extended beyond the player. Fellow prisoners, initially suspicious of both instrument and guards, found themselves drawn in, eyebrows lifted, hands unclenched, and eyes softened. Some whispered softly, recognizing familiar tunes. Even among women trained in military discipline, the music stirred long-suppressed feelings of longing, fear, and hope. For a brief moment, the war's rigid hierarchy seemed suspended. In letters written decades later, several former POWs recalled the piano as a symbol of humanity amidst the machinery of conflicta, reminder that even in captivity, the self could endure. American camp administrators recognized the value of recreation in maintaining order. Unlike Soviet camps, where prisoners often faced harsh physical labor and severe punishment, U.S. policy balanced discipline with minor freedoms. Musical instruments, books, and supervised leisure activities were part of a deliberate strategy. Reports from the 1944 to 45 period indicate that camp commanders often encouraged prisoners with musical training to play during breaks or communal events. The rationale was pragmatic. Engagement reduced boredom, tension, and the likelihood of disobedience. Music offered an outlet for emotion that might otherwise manifest as dissent. By allowing the German female prisoner to play the piano, the Americans maintained strict control while simultaneously providing a rare psychological reprieve. It was an example of calculated leniency where humanity and military efficiency intersected. The guard's restraint and attentiveness ensured that the act did not compromise security, demonstrating the American understanding of morale as a tool of administration. German female POWs carried expectations shaped by propaganda and rumor. They anticipated harsh treatment, confiscated possessions, forced labor, and verbal or physical intimidation. Their cultural understanding of war and military discipline suggested that mercy from the enemy was rare. The sight of a piano, polished and ready for use, subverted these assumptions. The initial reaction was disbelief. Some approached with suspicion, others with cautious curiosity. The first woman to sit at the keys risked embarrassment if the gesture was perceived as frivolous or inappropriate. Instead, the American silent observation created a space of trust. Music became a bridge between captor and captive, a moment where enemy lines blurred, and the shared humanity of both sides was briefly illuminated. This dissonance between expectation of cruelty and experience of restraint magnified the impact of the event, making it unforgettable for those involved. The psychological dimension of the piano moment was profound. Captivity, even under humane conditions, induces stress, anxiety, and a sense of powerlessness. In American camps, minor freedoms such as access to recreation huts or musical instruments were more than mere amenities. They were essential tools to mitigate mental strain. Music, specifically, tapped into memory, identity, and emotion, allowing prisoners to reclaim a portion of their autonomy. Studies of POW behavior from the period, corroborated by post-war testimonies, revealed that structured recreational activities reduced incidents of conflict and psychological deterioration. The act of playing the piano, with its tactile engagement and auditory reward, created a rare instance of immediate, positive feedback. For the German women, the notes reverberated beyond the wood and strings. They resonated within minds fatigued by fear, isolation, and uncertainty. The piano became a sanctuary, however temporary, within the confines of captivity. This event also raised subtle ethical questions. Warfare often strips individuals of personal agency, especially prisoners. By allowing the German female POW to play the piano, the Americans recognized her humanity without compromising authority. It was a quiet assertion of moral responsibility, a reminder that humane treatment could coexist with military necessity. The act of playing music, in this context, symbolized dignity restored. It challenged the notion that enemy soldiers must be dehumanized, demonstrating that empathy and order were not mutually exclusive. Historians note that such small gestures often had outsized impacts on morale, shaping the memories of those involved and informing broader discussions on the ethics of war. From a practical standpoint, the piano was more than a symbol. It was a tool in the larger operational strategy of American POW camps. Commanders understood that order was easiest maintained when prisoners had structured routines. That included not only labor and roll calls, but also controlled recreational opportunities. The recreation hall, with its piano, tables, and seating, became an extension of this philosophy. By permitting a prisoner to play, the camp authorities created a controlled outlet for emotion, reducing the likelihood of disruptive behavior. Officers observed that music distracted prisoners from idle speculation, homesickness, or tension that could escalate into conflict. It was an efficient, low-risk way to manage morale while reinforcing the hierarchy of the camp. In this context, the piano was both a literal and symbolic instrument of authority, a gesture of trust, yet bounded by the rules and surveillance of captivity. The decision to allow music in POW camps reflected a leadership philosophy that combined pragmatism with humanity. Camp commanders, often junior officers, were responsible not only for security, but also for the psychological welfare of hundreds of prisoners. Allowing a German woman to play the piano required confidence, foresight, and a nuanced understanding of human behavior. Historical documents from U.S. military archives indicate that commanders believed such gestures fostered cooperation. Leaders recognized that prisoners responded positively to small freedoms, which could prevent larger issues. By balancing discipline with empathy, the camp officers demonstrated a leadership style that prioritized both security and morality. The piano moment illustrates how even minor decisions, grounded in foresight and compassion, could ripple across the camp environment. Viewed through a historical lens, the piano incident represents a small but telling example of wartime ethics. War, by nature, strips life down to survival and strategy. Yet the Americans' decision to allow music acknowledges the possibility of preserving humanity within conflict. Contemporary historians highlight such moments as evidence that ethical treatment of POWs was not only feasible, but beneficial to operational efficiency. The piano moment also underscores the contrast with other POW experiences. In many camps, prisoners endured abuse, starvation, or forced labor. Here, an act as simple as playing music became a lens through which broader questions of morality, culture, and leadership were revealed. The event demonstrated that even in the machinery of war, human dignity could persist, and small interventions could have lasting psychological and historical impact. Interestingly, the piano did not only affect prisoners. Guards and officers often reported unexpected emotional responses. Some admitted to feeling moved by the music, experiencing brief glimpses of empathy for the individuals they oversaw. This mutual recognition of skill, courage, and shared humanity quietly reshaped interactions within the camp. The brief suspension of strict roles allowed guards to see prisoners as complex individuals, rather than simply detainees, and for prisoners, it reinforced the possibility of safety, trust, and respect. The convergence of these angles, human, operational, ethical, psychological, and leadership, reveals the piano moment as far more than a trivial curiosity. It was a nexus point, a humanizing event embedded within a structured military environment, touching the lives of prisoners and captors alike. Music became a bridge across fear, authority, and cultural difference, and in doing so, it transformed a single barracks into a temporary sanctuary. This multifaceted understanding sets the stage for the climactic moment, when the piano is finally played, and the event crystallizes into a moment of shared humanity that will linger in memory, far beyond the confines of the camp. March 3, 1945. The air is crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine and frost from the surrounding forest. The American POW camp, located near a small village in western Germany, sits quietly behind barbed wire and watchtowers. Inside one wooden barracks, German female prisoners move through their morning routines, making beds, scrubbing floors, and lining up for roll call. The monotony is punctuated only by the distant hum of trucks and the occasional shouted order from a guard dot in a recreation hut. A polished upright piano gleams under the weak winter sunlight streaming through frosted windows. It had been placed there weeks earlier, donated by Red Cross volunteers and maintained carefully by the camp officers. The prisoners had glanced at it before, curious, wary, but no one had dared touch the keys. Today, a young woman, Maria Lehman, steps forward. Her fingers hover above the ivory for a moment, hesitant. She knows all eyes, both fellow prisoners and guards, are on her. The first note resonates softly, almost timidly. The sound is fragile, breaking the silence like a whispered secret. Maria's hands shake, but she continues, pressing keys with tentative confidence. The melody is simple, a German folk tune learned in childhood, yet it carries weight far beyond its modest structure. The other prisoners, initially hesitant, inch closer. Their breaths catch. The tension in the room, palpable moments before, begins to dissolve. The guards, trained for vigilance, pause. They had not expected music in this environment, nor had they anticipated the effect it would have. The melody, delicate and unexpected, cast a quiet spell. For a few minutes, the war's hierarchy seems suspended. Maria's music transforms the room. Fear softens. Curiosity replaces suspicion. And an unspoken understanding passes among captors and captives alike. One by one, other prisoners begin to hum along softly, timidly at first, then with growing confidence. The tune spreads, filling the barracks with a warmth previously unimaginable in the rigid, cold order of captivity. Outside, a guard stops pacing, listening. For a fleeting moment, the gun at his hip feels heavier, the uniform constraining. The music reminds him, like everyone present, of the humanity that all share. Despite the war that separates them, reports from American camp records indicate that such events, while rare, had a profound psychological impact. This moment, simple and unplanned, highlights the calculated balance of order and freedom maintained in U.S. camps. By allowing the piano to be played, the commanders provided a controlled opportunity for self-expression, reducing tension and fostering compliance, all without diminishing security. The result is immediate, visible, and transformative. The atmosphere in the barracks shifts completely. Women who had been withdrawn, fearful of punishment for a misstep, now exchange glances, some even smiling. Music, a universal language, erases the artificial boundaries imposed by captivity. In this charged silence, history is being quietly rewritten, not in the roar of artillery, but in the gentle echo of keys striking ivory. Maria's performance continues, gaining confidence with each note. The tune carries over your hum of distant activity outside the barracks, touching others who might hear it, a reminder of life beyond confinement, of memory and culture preserved amidst chaos. The scene embodies the collision of military authority, cultural expectation, and human emotion, creating a moment that feels almost cinematic in its poignancy. As the final notes linger, the room remains silent, suspended in a fragile equilibrium. No one speaks immediately. The guards, respectful and perhaps unsettled, step back, allowing the prisoners a rare victory of personal agency. The women absorb the significance quietly. This small act, permitted by captors and embraced by peers, is a testament to endurance, identity, and shared humanity. The sound of the piano continues to resonate through the barracks, filling every corner with a fragile warmth. Maria's fingers move with increasing confidence, each note a small rebellion against the rigid structure that had governed her life for months. The other prisoners, previously tense and wary, begin to hum softly in unison, forming a quiet chorus of recognition and memory. Their faces, drawn and pale from confinement, soften as the familiar melody evokes home, family, and the life they had left behind. The American guards remain silent, observing closely but refraining from interference. Their instructions had been clear: maintain order, prevent unrest, enforce rules. Yet here, in this brief interlude, the rigid boundary between captor and captive blurs. Some guards, accustomed to seeing prisoners as numbers rather than people, feel a subtle shift, a reminder that these women are more than uniformed detainees. They are individuals with histories, talents, and emotions. One guard adjusts his coat, listening intently, a faint trace of curiosity in his posture. Word of the music spreads quickly among the prisoners. Women from adjoining barracks pause in their routines, leaning toward open windows or doorways to catch the sound. Inside, a few prisoners who had never played before approach the piano hesitantly. Encouraged by Maria's example, a second melody emerges, tentative at first, but gaining strength as they recognize the safety afforded by the structured permissiveness of the camp. Music becomes a shared language, a quiet revolution of human connection within the strict confines of captivity. This moment does not occur in isolation. Camp logs from March 1945 indicate that recreational activities, including piano performances, were consciously used to manage morale. Officers noted that such events reduced tension, mitigated potential conflicts, and improved overall compliance. In this case, however, the human element eclipses strategy. The music is not merely a tool, but an assertion of identity, a reclaiming of self amidst the depersonalizing forces of war. It is both a personal and collective victory, subtle yet profound. As the day progresses, more prisoners gather in the recreation hut, their presence quiet but deliberate. Whispers of songs learned in youth, of melodies from school or church, circulate among them. Each note played on the piano reinforces the fragile trust between captors and captives. The women begin to recognize that their environment, though controlled, allows for moments of creativity and dignity, a realization both shocking and liberating. After months of rigid confinement and fear, the camp commander, observing discreetly from a corner, notes the effect with careful approval. He records in his journal that the prisoners appeared calmer, more cooperative, and visibly more engaged in their routines following the performance. Guards report fewer disputes, less tension during work details, and an overall sense of order that exceeded expectations. The piano, an unlikely instrument of authority and morale, achieves exactly what military strategy, discipline, and supervision alone could not. By evening, the music subsides. The prisoners return to their bunks, the faint echo of the final notes lingering in the air. Yet the impact remains palpable. Conversations among women carry a newfound softness. Smiles, once rare, appear more readily. Guards, too, reflect on the unusual day, carrying with them a subtle awareness of the humanity that exists, even in those classified as the enemy. It is a small, silent victory over the dehumanization that war imposes on both sides. Historians who have studied POW camps note that such events, though brief and seemingly minor, had lasting significance. Letters and interviews conducted decades later reveal that prisoners remembered these musical interludes vividly, often as highlights of their captivity. The act of playing the piano, sanctioned by the captors, became an enduring symbol of agency, dignity, and the preservation of culture amidst the chaos of war. As night falls over the camp, the barracks quiet once more. Yet the memory of the piano persists, an emblem of human resilience, empathy, and the unexpected intersections of authority and compassion. It is a moment where music transcends barriers, a fleeting yet transformative experience that reshapes the dynamics of the camp and leaves an indelible impression on all who witnessed it. In the days following the piano performance, the atmosphere within the camp shifted in subtle but meaningful ways. German female prisoners, once tense and cautious, exhibited a new level of composure. The brief moment of creative freedom had reinforced a sense of agency that persisted beyond the recreation hut. Officers noted in daily logs that roll calls proceeded more smoothly. Work details were completed with fewer complaints, and minor disputes among prisoners decreased. Music, once an anomaly, had become a quiet instrument of order for the prisoners. The psychological impact was immediate. Women who had avoided the recreation hut now began to enter voluntarily, drawn by curiosity and the memory of the first melody. Some brought small songs or humming from childhood. Others attempted to learn short pieces on the piano under the watchful eyes of the guards. Letters written home later reveal that many of these women considered the piano a symbol of normalcy. Amid the upheaval of war, a tangible link to the life they had been forced to leave behind. The guards, too, felt the repercussions. Those who had initially viewed the piano as a trivial distraction began to recognize its broader effects. They observed that music created a shared understanding, reducing tension not only among prisoners, but between prisoners and their overseers. Several officers reflected in post-war interviews that allowing controlled recreation, particularly music, fostered respect and subtle empathy that reshaped the dynamics within the camp. The interaction highlighted the potential for humanity to coexist with military authority, a rare but profound lesson in wartime leadership. Operationally, the piano became a model for morale management. Camp logs indicate that after the initial performance, music sessions were occasionally scheduled in the recreation hall. Officers used them to encourage participation, reinforce discipline, and maintain a sense of order. While the act of playing the piano was voluntary, the presence of the instrument and the structured environment it created became an essential part of the camp's daily rhythm. This approach was aligned with broader U.S. military policy. Humane treatment of prisoners could enhance compliance, minimize conflict, and reflect positively in both internal reports and international perception. The immediate impact extended beyond the physical confines of the barracks. News of the musical interlude spread through word of mouth, reaching prisoners in neighboring huts. Those who had not witnessed the performance firsthand spoke of it with awe, elevating the piano's presence from a mere instrument to a symbol of possibility. For women who feared the unpredictability of American authority, the event provided a small but meaningful reassurance. While captivity imposed constraints, it could also accommodate moments of dignity and expression. Yet the significance of the piano was not solely practical. It was an emotional anchor, a shared memory that bridged differences, and a reminder of resilience. For many prisoners, it became a point of reference during the long, monotonous months of confinement. Testimonies collected after the war emphasize that even brief moments of creative freedom playing music, singing, or reciting poetry offered profound relief from fear, homesickness, and the psychological strains of imprisonment. This period marked the beginning of a subtle transformation within the camp. The initial act of allowing a prisoner to play music demonstrated that authority could be exercised with empathy. It also revealed the ways in which culture, memory, and creativity could persist in the most constrained environments. From a broader perspective, the piano was both a tool of control and a conduit of liberation, a paradox that defined the unique nature of humane POW management. Weeks turned into months, and the war in Europe drew closer to its conclusion. The German female prisoners, including those who had played or listened to the piano, were gradually integrated into the final routines of the camp. The initial tension of capture had eased into a predictable rhythm: roll calls, work details, and supervised recreation, but the memory of that single morning remained vivid. Many women recalled the piano not merely as an object, but as a symbol of dignity and humanity that transcended the confines of captivity. As Allied forces advanced and the war neared its end, repatriation plans were set in motion. German prisoners were transported back to their homeland, often by rail, under close supervision. Testimonies collected decades later indicate that the piano moment lingered in memory far longer than the harshness of daily camp routines. For many, it became a touchstone, a reminder that even in the harshest conditions, small acts of trust and creativity could leave an enduring mark. Letters, memoirs, and oral histories reflect this sentiment. Women recalled the music with warmth, associating it with a rare experience of freedom, control, and emotional release. The long-term significance extended to the American officers and guards as well. Many reflected in post-war interviews that the piano moment had humanized their understanding of the prisoners. For guards, witnessing the transformation from fear and suspicion to tentative joy and pride provided insight into the power of small, calculated acts of humanity. It reinforced a leadership philosophy that combined discipline with empathy, illustrating that morale, compliance, and respect could coexist in a structured environment. Historians analyzing POW treatment during World War II highlight this incident as emblematic of broader differences between American, British, and Soviet camps. While many prisoners in Soviet custody experienced harsh labor and deprivation, American policies, grounded in the Geneva Convention, allowed space for controlled recreation, education, and cultural expression. The piano incident demonstrates that even minor privileges could have profound psychological effects, reshaping the prisoner's experience of captivity and influencing their long-term perceptions of the enemy. The event also had cultural implications. For women trained in music before the war, it was an opportunity to reconnect with their own identities and past lives. It provided a moment of artistic expression that contrasted sharply with the otherwise rigid routines of camp life. In this sense, the piano became a bridge not only between captors and captives, but between the prisoners' present confinement and the world they had been forced to leave behind. Even after repatriation, the story endured, Many former prisoners recounted the event to family, friends, and historians, emphasizing the rarity of kindness during a period dominated by conflict and hardship. For some, it shaped their understanding of humanity, ethics, and cross-cultural interaction during war. For others, it remained a personal memory, a brief yet unforgettable reminder that even in captivity, the human spirit could find a voice. In essence, the aftermath of the piano moment extended far beyond the barracks. It reshaped daily life in the camp, influenced leadership approaches, and left an enduring psychological and cultural legacy. It illustrated that humane treatment, even in microcosm, could alter relationships, morale, and memory. The ripple effects of this single, unexpected act of music highlight the subtle power of creativity, empathy, and dignity in a world otherwise defined by conflict, hierarchy, and survival. In the quiet aftermath of war, when the guns had fallen silent and Europe began the slow process of reconstruction, moments like the piano in a POW camp endure in memory. They remind us that even amid conflict, humanity can persist in the smallest gestures. The act of allowing German female prisoners to play music was, on the surface, minor diversion in a harsh, regulated environment, yet its significance stretched far beyond the keys and notes. It became a testament to resilience, empathy, and the power of culture to transcend fear. The piano symbolized a fragile reclamation of identity. For the women who sat before it, it was a chance to reconnect with childhood, with family, and with the rhythms of a life interrupted by war. For the American guards, it was an unexpected reminder that those classified as enemies were also human, capable of talent, emotion, and dignity. In this convergence of circumstances, a simple melody bridged the divide between captive and captor, between fear and trust, between duty and compassion. Historically, this moment offers a window into the ethics and psychology of warfare. It challenges the notion that power must always manifest as dominance or cruelty. Instead, it demonstrates that structured kindness, small, deliberate acts can influence morale, discipline, and memory in profound ways. Music became a medium through which authority and empathy coexisted, showing that even in the machinery of war, personal dignity could survive, more than a note played or a song remembered. The piano represents the enduring human need for expression, connection, and recognition. It is a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of history, small acts of creativity and compassion can ripple across lives, shaping the stories that endure. In the echo of those keys, the war's brutality and its fleeting moments of grace coexist, teaching a lesson that resonates long after the conflict has ended, that humanity, once recognized, can flourish even in captivity, and in the silence that follows the final note. One truth remains clear: sometimes the most powerful victories in war are not won with weapons, but with music. If this incredible story of German female POWs and the unexpected power of music moved you, hit that like button to show your support. Don't forget to subscribe for more real and untold WWII stories that history almost forgot. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which moment in this story touched you the most? And what would you have felt in their place?